I'm gonna open the app and see where we can land. What I can do is I can give a quick update on the last overview page, what we did, and maybe we can discuss then the recommendations that or challenges that has not been addressed at all, so that we cover the full scope. Here is the Beyond MVG application. We have, for the people on the YouTube who's gonna see the recording, we have onboarding page here that goes from people who have no clue about Cardano and want to kind of dabble into it, once getting the grasp of that. Then this workshop itself focuses on governance measurement metrics that are on-chain. And based on these metrics that we have identified, we have had this problem discussions and now assigned challenges on top of that. Then earlier in these weeks of workshops, we identified recommendations and then in the middle started prioritizing them. And when we did that, we basically got to this list of recommendations here. Now there are 35 and they have some kind of ranking based on what should be like discussed, what should have priority. And if you go into them, they are also some are assessed and given like how impactful, urgent, technical risk cost it has. And now I created this kind of like a 2D or 3D graph, which shows like relations to these challenges in the gray boxes or like squares, and all the recommendations are circles. So right now we have the color coded is by Moscow tier. So everything that is red is what people said they must have. We need to focus on them. And size is like score size is like basically the score of all the assessments, or we could change like what is the most impactful or what is the most urgent to discuss. Oftentimes impact and urgency goes together, but you never know what patterns you will notice. If I checkbox the mark workshop discussions, we will see what we have discussed. So we can kind of avoid going through all of the things like we already have and see like new information. And based on already this kind of small bubble chart, I can notice that we have one purple box here, and it's a challenge. Translation remain a deterrent to participation. So none of the workshops we have so far, none of them covered recommendations to assess or even try to like tackle that challenge. So perhaps we could today focus on that, or if everybody gives it some kind of understanding what is the problem and what are the possible recommendations. I think this is more than just the translations remain deterrent. It's even the cultures of having like French-speaking people, or people talking in Cardano other language than English. This is like a quick show of what has updated, what potentially could be our next topics. We could also discover this mini DRep. It's urgent, it's a must, but undiscussed topic by Keen Bacon, unknown. So how do you feel in these calls? Which direction we should go? Or
discussing some of the gaps in the feedback that there are sounds like a good idea to me.
And you mean gaps in the translations? Or
if I understood correctly, you mentioned some topics or areas where um, you hadn't received any input yet. So we, going over some of those uh, gaps or shortfalls so far in terms of the data sounds a good use of time to me. Just as my 2 bits.
Okay. Does Rodrigo want to also share their opinion, which direction to go?
I agree with this idea of filling these blank spots. I'm not sure about which ones are missing right now. You mentioned about the translation aspect, and I'm not sure if there are other ones that we could discuss in this meeting. In the previous meeting, I remember that there was a lot of discussion about SPOs and some a little discussion about the CCs as well. So maybe we should focus on other areas in this workshop.
Yeah, but it's easy to find a gap in a sense of what has been discussed when we mark the workshop. So everything that has this this blue frame, it means we had topic there. But if it doesn't, then it hasn't had that kind of focused discussion. And this purple one is this which doesn't have any recommendation. So all these gray boxes are challenges, but every challenge has something where this one has nothing.
The purple one seems to be a low hanging fruit. We could discuss about it because I don't think we have much to add related to translations. In my view, we should integrate AI solutions to translate the content related to governance. Actually, on Twitter X, we already have the capacity to have auto translations, and some tools related to governance, such as app.cgov.io, are already providing translation features. They provide support for about 4 or 5 languages, if I remember correctly.
I'm just gonna write down that obvious thing that to integrate AI solutions. But I wonder, one thing is translating the information, but how would we go about incubating different language cultures in general? Because if we just translate, it's almost like one way communication. I have never translated Japanese. I know Yuta is doing this constitutional stuff but even then I don't take that Japanese text and translate it into English to make sense of that.
Some DReps on the Japanese community are doing translations for both English and Japanese as well. And for me, for example, I'm part of the Brazilian community, so I provide context in Portuguese as well in my rationales as DRep. So in my view, this feature of localization of content would be on DRep's shoulders. In my view, it would make more sense to delegate this responsibility to DReps, inform their communities with localized content and giving the proper context to them.
Okay. This is shifting the recommendation from tooling to processes or people. And I want to capture both of these. But before we close in the translation tooling apart, what would be expected outcome when we have integrated solutions, AI solutions in right now?
In my view, sorry. So in my view, the main purpose of using AI to translate it would be to facilitate the access to information, maybe the metadata regarding the texts of governance actions, all types of governance actions, because this would enable people from other communities, countries, to understand the context of each proposal. And the DRep side of the job would be to give the feedback, their rationales in a translated form. This could be done by AI as well, but DRep knows the context of his own community, his country. So, in my view, each DRep would be more aligned to provide this kind of context. So, in my view, this could be a two-side approach. I don't see too many hurdles to implement this, because we are already seeing this kind of translation being made by several DReps. I know some of them writing in Japanese, some of them writing in Spanish, Portuguese. I don't know about other languages. Maybe we should look for language that are not being prioritized right now. I don't know about Chinese or other language spoken in different sides of the world.
Would that be then incentivizing leaders to translate or at least check translations?
If I think this could be solved more into the DRep incentive side, because if we incentivize DReps to be more active and diligent, naturally this would spread their energy to offer this kind of translation, localization services and context to their communities.
Yeah, it's a hard problem. You don't really have that problem until somebody complains, but you don't have nobody to complain if they don't know the thing.
Yeah, it's true. In Brazil, for example, there is a tiny amount of people who engages in governance right now, maybe because we are in the middle of a bear market. But in Brazil, almost no one speaks about governance. This is not a hot topic anymore. About 3 years ago, in the start of the discussions related to 1694, this topic was discussed a lot in our community in Brazil, in Portuguese-speaking communities as well. However, right now we don't have much action in this area.
Yeah, I'm now going into like, there's one thing when we started translations work group in another network, the first kind of bottleneck was, okay, we created translations, but we didn't know who was reading it. We got the views on that. So then we doubled down, okay, now you need to do polling and engaging with the reader to understand what are they learning from this translated article and why do they read it. And there was no responses. And then it was like, are all the bots reading this, or like where are the views coming from? And when you stop translating, there's no feedback either on why was it stopped. Like, hey, so it's just wondering, it's just like who are we doing it for? So in that same sense, what would be the expected outcome of like initial, let's say we do incentivize, like somebody selected DReps who are taking charge of selected translations of their, okay, it's one thing to translate your own rationale or own decision making and maybe the focus point of the proposals they're reading or governance actions. One other thing is translating not just translating, but speaking in their own language, the discussions that need to be had. For example, the same session we're having right now, but their own language. Like, is that an outcome? Yeah.
I'd like to jump in, okay? the idea at this point seems a little overwhelming for you, and I envision it a little bit differently. I would say that all that is needed is for IO, for example, to kind of create a pilot implementation of that. Say, pick a language, ask around in the DReps, say Japanese or something, and see who's willing to do it, and then create that community, foster it so that the results that you want are happening in a Japanese community with a Japanese DRep doing that translation, or maybe even use Rodrigo as the example. Actually, that would be the simplest one based on what we already had talked about, and then just ask IO to hold that up as a successful working example and just suggest that other DReps working around the world, if they're working in languages other than English, they can follow that same model. And then that's it. I think that's all you need to get it off the ground. The trap here is focusing too heavily on the technology when you have people who understand it implicitly and are willing to do it. Just leverage that and don't require something to be embodied in the protocol to make it happen. Just let people figure it out. Again, the key piece here to me is, rather than relying on the protocol, is just have IO be willing to stand up and say, this is the right thing to do and this is the right way to do it, and people will do it for that reason. They don't need necessarily to be paid or to be sort of prodded by a technology always.
Okay, and here the expected outcome is then there will be people who want to be in that position to translate and verify like language, what they are capable of, because they're already interested in that activity anyway. They are multilingual.
Yes.
And yeah, and then we just need to kind of figure out how to assess them. I guess it's like a second order issue. First, we need to get the consort of people who are willing to take the position. Is that like
okay?
Or do we need to think through the recommendation, like that we expect them to do X when they apply to be in the job of leading a language?
Okay, to me, this is one where you start by cooperating or trusting. If someone says, I can do this, you let them do it. And if they need extra support to do it, I think you would, so then all you need is a channel, some sort of a channel where, say ADA holders who are kind of supporting a DRep and needing a translation. If it's not working for them, you just need an email address, like support@gov.cardano.org or whatever. People say, hey, I'm really excited to work with this DRep, but I'm not getting translations. Can you guys take a look and help make this happen a little bit better? That's all that's needed, I think, in that case, in terms of that check or balance. And that would be a very wide-ranging, just like there's a support email at Amazon, or if something's not working out, you just email them and they deal with it. I mean, crypto exchanges, everybody has, support, click the button and say, hey, this isn't working, where's my transaction or whatever. So it would be just, same kind of thing, but maybe just needing a little bit more human support in some areas of the Cardano community to keep things running smoothly like that.
Based on these we kind of floated 3 recommendations here. One was translation tooling. Another one is integrating DRep incentives and translation shop. They are very similar. Based on these 3 options pushed today, I'm going to ask Seun Jibiri, who has not, I don't know if you are able to open mic, but if you listened along, which one of these would you think has the most impact or like and low effort, I would say?
Yeah, I think it is going to be the translation tooling. So because the translation tooling, I've not been paying attention completely because I'm working, but what I got is a tool like useful, I think an AI agent, right, for translating proposals to local language. So I think that would be quite easy to implement since there are already base LLMs to do this already. So we just need to find some of them and work with that basically.
Okay, I opened up the translation shop. Let's try to assess it. Regarding the Moscow there, must, should, could, won't. It's hard to kind of, I would even say it's a must, even though it feels like a non-issue. But I think as soon as, if there is an issue somewhere, I feel like, because it's such a low-hanging fruit to tackle, I would suggest must. Is there somebody who kind of objects or feels like, no, it's a should, we have bigger problems right now to focus on? Okay, I see lots of thumbs up, no objections. So, and based on Seon's like information, the impact, how many people, processes are affected? Well, I would say it's not entire ecosystem that is getting impact, but it's hard to kind of tell, is it a niche group? I think it's a stance that IRG, well, not IRG, Cardano in general has to take, that we are not a single language blockchain. I think this is why it has to be at least more than 5 impact. But it's the narrative thing again. So
yeah, I mean, I guess I see it as translation job that's part of the DRep role for one thing, and allow for some diversity in the way that the role is maybe filled. Because, like, for example, I wouldn't have a second language. I'm not a DRep, but it just wouldn't be something I would take on because I can't. So maybe it's just presented as, you know, hey, these are some possible ways that DReps, you know, collaborate. And, you know, again, I mean, taking any country, really, there should be more than one DRep per, say, language. And so not everyone has to do it. So it's not so much a job or as just a responsibility that needs to be covered for every language, but exactly how it gets done can vary, actually. It's something that, say, DReps working in a language other than English need to plan and you know, are encouraged to put together some kind of solution so that people using Cardano can use it natively and not have to use English as you know, second language or so. So it's more like just like an expectation or an encouragement, a suggestion. And again, if it's possible to hold up 1 or 2 examples of DRep communities where this is going well, then these are just models that people can look at to do the same thing. And the reason for doing it, the motivation, is because it works, because it brings more people into the community and into the discussion, and that accomplishes better work and more engagement. So
I increased the impact to 7 because it has this like butterfly effect, but I don't know, is it like, it's hard to kind of compare with other like impact discussions we have had there. Who has not talked yet? Frederick and Maureen. When we look, I don't know if you're have any issues with the impact or like you want to change that or provide additional information. If not, then how about tackling the urgency? Is there a deadline or a time pressure for these kinds of translations? Do you feel like it could wait indefinitely, or we would need to be a very immediately work on that first, or is there something that should be done before we are looking for translators in the Cardano ecosystem?
Thank you very much, and thank you for that question. I've been following the conversation, although I came in a little bit later. Yeah. If you ask me, in my view, I think we have to approach this, I think, like a project, right? And if it has to be carried out as a project, there has to be a timeline, right? So there has to be a starting point as to when this program can get started, and when whoever is going to be tasked, when they can be involved in the project, and there has to be some milestones along the way. What are the deliverables and in what time frame? Because if we leave it open-ended, it can take the next 5 years or more without ever accomplishing or making the needed impact. So I believe it's important to have a time frame and also to set the milestones along the way. Thank you.
But considering, so if it does like turn into as a project, I didn't even consider it as a project. I thought it's more like a role that we finance, and we have like a, but in some sense it is a project because it's like we don't need 1,000 translators of Japanese. We would perhaps need few who coordinate in that language, and the more we have, the better, I guess. But there is a still limit. Like we don't need 170 different languages, or maybe we do. And that these discussions do feel like it's then turns into a project discussions. But in terms of like urgency here is like, should we start with that project discussions now, or can we wait 1 year, 2 years? Like what's the, what would be the terms of like, should we start earlier or later?
I guess my question would be, what is the need? Okay, how urgent is the need? And then what are the pros and cons of starting earlier, or the pros and cons of starting later on? So I think considering the need on the ground right now, should be able to determine the agents of the matter, and then that can inform us on like when this program can get started, or how urgent it is, or maybe if it can wait. Thank you.
Yeah, well, what we do know is that this challenge was surfaced to at least in our reporting as one, like a factor that was a problem in engaging in governance. But yeah, it's hard to, we don't have like a numeric pressure point there. So I guess it is like less urgent. I wouldn't say we can wait indefinitely, but it's 2, 3. I'm more radical. I'm going to put 2. Is this related to voters questionnaire? So yes, it could be. If you mean by voters questionnaire, the surveys that we'll have few months ago, the Beyond MVG service. Then probably there was, yes, it surfaced. Yeah, I guess what here is important, if there are YouTube viewers now, that's the thing, like the people who have urgency to see that won't have a voice in here to say this is urgent. So I think this is like the problem. We are like not seeing that well through. Yeah, I might have actually put skip here. But trying to assess it fully, can this be built in existing tools? Yes, it can be very much. Oliver already kind of mentioned that this is not like, there is a standard procedures for having a job role. And we actually already have translators and people in lead if they are just not kind of, we don't know exactly who to point to or who to like direct to. And what resources would be needed. How costly? Yeah, I wonder. Like, to me, it feels like a very cheap problem, but nobody addresses it. But maybe it is. Maybe we don't. Yeah, see the true cost here. Does anybody want to try and tackle how much does it take or cost to like translate governance to their constituents or just members?
If I'm given the parameters of this program, I think it's something I can give it a shot. Something I can. I don't know how much time you'd give. Like when you'd need those results.
Yeah, I guess there is a more like an abstract situation when you were thinking like, oh, this must be a project. And yeah, the problem here probably is that we all vision a slightly different project when we think about translator jobs and like creating that consortium of people who are capable of leading their local culture and yeah, intertwining it with English like governance discussions. So it's yeah, there isn't like exact cost, I would say. I mean, because that's true that the translation, the work of translating is now, I would even say, cheap. What costs is the validation of that information and distribution of that information. And maybe more specifically, distribution to those who want to hear that or would prefer to learn about that, and they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Maybe that's why the cost estimate is expensive, because it requires like lead generation or like research of that new pocket of people who will be engaged in these discussions we're having here. But it has to be, but there's this higher order like discussion is why would they choose to discuss their local issues in context of Cardano? Of course, we are like this 1% of 1% minority who understands what blockchain could do for people. But yeah, I mean, this translation isn't actually easy.
Maybe to get more context, we are saying that as we endeavor to build the Cardano ecosystem and communities, right? So it's like there's a language barrier here. Is that what I'm getting? So there's a language barrier to reach as many communities as possible, right? Like in this case, we are considering the Japanese community, right? So there's a language barrier. Is that
Yeah.
the context.
The challenge is translations remain deterrent to participation. And I guess that's a language barrier issue. Like those who speak native, let's say Spanish, Japanese, Portuguese, and very little English, they have very little reason to read any governance actions or translate the governance actions to read them, or even engage in these workshops. Like workshops are probably even out of the question if they're all English like that, because I know very little, like few Spanish and few Japanese meetings that exist.
Absolutely. And you know, that can be a challenge because first of all, somebody learns a new language. They cannot comprehend everything entirely. And in addition to that, if they have to deal with a bit of some technical, terms or technical aspects of the ecosystem, that poses another challenge. So what I believe is, like it has been commented on earlier, programs do have a bigger impact when it's conducted in the local language. The language that is closer to people's hearts, right? Yeah. So if people appreciate the message in their language, it's easy for them to act on it. Now, if it comes in foreign language, it's difficult. There's motivation for people to want to embrace the message or to act on it, right? So I heard
Sorry, I think you cut off.
use of maybe taking advantage of language models. Am I audible?
Yeah. Okay. Trying to push the last 5 questions here. With the cost estimate, yeah, I leave it on my perspective as a 7. If somebody disagrees, you also have your own ability to assess the scoring. Aligns with Cardano roadmap. I'm kind of, well, it is like focusing on new users, in my opinion, or strengthening the existing users. Probably it's more about new users, but I'm not sure how directly that is aligned with the roadmap for now, so I'm going to skip it. How quickly can it benefits be realized? Again, here the benefits are not probably even years to realize. It depends again, who do you talk to? Sometimes if there is a CEO leader who just talks in one language, maybe most often French people, and they have a, I don't know, data center having important information that like on a Frankenstein, I don't know, collision of tools. And then somebody coming and, hey, do you know about this Cardano stuff and this governance? This kind of solves your problem in their own local language and able to pinpoint to some kind of reports that are in their language. It could turn into, yeah, it's still not going to take months, but not like weeks, but yeah, so that's like it. Time to value can be quicker if it's focused, like interviews in their local language. But this is general translation. DRep translating their own rationales or verifying the translations. Yeah, it's very hard to even know if that has an impact, because somebody has to on the other side put attention there and maybe say that. So I say that for me that would be 1, because it's hard to recognize the benefit. How much uncertainty is in this approach? even though we went through so many different perspectives, I think there is a little smaller like technical risk and uncertainty, and it's understood what we expect from translations. But let's see from Ayomi, Shuga, or Maureen, would you want to try and tackle like is translation jobs well understood, or are they highly uncertain, or like if there is a recommendation and that passes and we just allow?
I think Marine is on a very, very bad internet connection, Theo.
All right. But Ken, you, as you opened up mic, do you want to try to tackle this? What's your like view on all this translation job role?
Yeah, so I just tapped in here because I had a meeting that were cut short. So you guys were debating translation of governance. That's true, right?
Yeah.
And that it needs to be translated. Japanese was mentioned here. So this is my point of view. It's like it is very interesting to see that, let's say, all governance proposals, they are all done in English only, despite that the proposal are targeting. Well, at least if you are a proposal, you should target the Japanese community. They hold, a lot of ADA in the ecosystem and a lot of voting power. If I had like the God mode will, I would have like a CIP where it's recommended that proposals at least add another secondary language to their governance actions. And that's actually a bit strange that people not doing this. How easy is it to implement this? Well, creating a CIP for this and put it out there as a standard. That process should be fairly easy, but to get the adoption of it, that is a learning curve, I think. But it's a very important, let's say, in hindsight to Beyond MVG research and the stuff that we are measuring. So we are measuring, equality, access, language barriers is a very important one that we need to tackle in the ecosystem.
Yeah, and I just want to add in, I don't know, this is like a bit like a diversion, but still almost similar, because I think another thing that might be important for the DReps is having like maybe simplified language for technical proposals, just like having like CIP for translations. You can also have like CIP for simplified languages for like technical proposals. Maybe we can have a simple language standard or something for these proposals.
And just fun fact, so when we were making the Corona Constitution, it was actually debated a lot if English should be the native language, or if it should be Japanese or Russian or whatever. And it actually, it was so, let's say, different opinion on this. So we decided to leave it out of the Corona Constitution.
Yeah, that's a cool insight. Dropped it down. Coming back to the translation job itself. So kind of heard rarely any technical risk. I would say we don't have legal issues there either, or regulatory compliance and maintainability we already touched. It's gonna be hard again. Maybe not as that much, but it requires reporting and assessing, especially in early days. So my perspective, I'm gonna leave it for a quick one. And since we're already a bit over time of the meeting, and I want to show you now what happened on the overview page. So if you zoom out, if you remember, we had the purple box here. I wonder if I can translate. Can I find it? Oh, I have more purple boxes now. Yeah, okay. This type of sharing doesn't make it easy to find the topic itself. I wonder if I reset it, is it up? Yeah, it doesn't even appear on the same place. Okay, translations remain deterrent. So it's no longer purple. We had 3 recommendations. It should actually be 4. I wonder why it doesn't pick up the 4th one we just created. Yeah. Or maybe I didn't attach recommendation. I did. I didn't. That's the issue. And I'm gonna do that. That was translation challenge, this translation tooling, save changes. Well, and yeah, okay, one more thing is that to put this translation job we discussed today, so that again, this will show up here as another big recommendation we discussed today, as this blue round stuff. So play around with this map, find what to discuss next, where to focus, and the more you assess, the more these numbers and sizes of bubbles will change. But for now, I think, thank you for joining up, tackling that topic that we didn't yet address before. We came up with 4 new recommendations. If there needs to be some balance and feel like, okay, I think AI tooling was easier to grasp than creating a job translator role, this is your opportunity to join the platform, pump these assessment numbers up, provide your comments. With this, you will feed the AI assistant, and those who want to engage in governance can kind of try to work with data. And based on that, we are going to write our report. We have one more planned workshop for this week, which is probably going to end with a retrospective of how it's all been going so far. And yeah, then we are going to wait for reporting.
Yeah, it's going to be a roundup on Friday, and we're probably going to be fashionable late, so we probably need a couple of days extra, and then yeah, when we get into next week, I think everything's going to be published.
Well, then again, thanks for joining, and see you in the next one.
Yeah, thank you, Tavo. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for hosting, Deborah.